Welcome everyone to our weekly Chaburah. I want to take the opportunity now to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for giving me the possibility to actually expound on His Torah, to give words of Torah. The infinite through the Torah to a finite human being is a very big schus, and I spend a lot of time preparing of what not to say also, but I end up learning a lot from it. So I thank you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for giving me the opportunity to teach Torah to Klal Yisrael. I would also like to thank Chazaq, as always, for giving me the job I have, that I can go into public schools every day, and I can give classes, and I can deal with college boys, and I grow tremendously from that. And also Torah Anytime for putting out all the lectures and all the Divrei Torah and everything that they do. Hundreds of shiurim a week are being given out to the masses all over the world. So kol hakavod, and thank you for that. This week there's a double parsha. There's two parshiot. There's Behar and Bechukotai. So we're gonna focus a little bit on Behar, and then we're gonna lead it into Bechukotai. So in Behar, it starts off the parsha starts off, Vayidar Hashem al Moshe Behar Sinai. Hashem speaks to Moshe in Har Sinai, Leimar, saying, Daber el Bnei Yisrael, speak to the Bnei Yisrael, V'marta aleim, and tell them, Kisavo el Aretz shani nosim lachem, V'shavsa ha'aretz Shabbos l'Hashem. There should be a rest, which we call Shemitah, for the land. So we all know that from this parsha we learn the tremendous yesod of Emunah and Bitachon. We know that we learn the tremendous yesod of Emunah and Bitachon from the fact that farmers, which most of the people were in those days especially, and in Eretz Yisrael there are many farmers today too, that they have to let their fields go on the seventh year. And actually today I was in a public school and I had 32 kids in the class, and they've never heard of Shemitah. They've never heard of it. They're pretty, the parents are pretty traditional, but they never heard of it. And I purposely brought up the topic because I wanted to ruffle their feathers, what it means for a farmer whose entire parnasa is based on his fields and his produce, and for the fact that for one full year, every seventh year, he just lets it go. And they were amazed, they were shocked, they were amazed, they had questions. And Baruch Hashem, we got through the topic, and I felt I really opened up to them the concept of Emunah and Bitachon, what it means to have Emunah and what it means to have Bitachon. So I'm going to start off by mentioning that the famous question: what is the difference between Emunah and Bitachon? What are the clarifications or classifications of what separates the inyan of Emunah and what separates Bitachon from that? So on a very basic level, Emunah is that we believe in Hashem, we know there's Hashem, we have a foundation of complete trust that there is a creator, that Hashem exists. Bitachon is actually secondary to Emunah, that once you have Emunah, you have Bitachon, that whatever Hashem does is best for each individual. That Hashem is watching over each individual, He cares for each individual, at every moment He's watching every individual. So they go hand in hand, obviously. They do go hand in hand, because you can have Emunah in Hashem, but you don't always believe that everything is for the best. You can have Emunah in Hashem, but not always believe that He's watching over you at every moment. Even though the Emunah means that Hashem does that. That's one of the concepts of understanding what Emunah is, that Hashem isn't just the creator, but that He is watching and He's involved in every aspect of the world. But Bitachon is also where you trust that everything Hashem does, come on to other, Rahman al-Tavavid, Gamzu Latova, everything Hashem does is for the best, that whenever the Rahman teaches you that even what you think is not good is actually good. So it's a complete and utter trust that whatever Hashem does to you is for your best. Not an easy thing. I will tell you, it's when somebody has his life going smooth for him, it's a lot easier to have bitachon. Okay, when somebody actually the light's shining on him and his life is running pretty smoothly, it's much easier to have bitachon. It's when it's dark, when it's difficult. A person has bitachon. That's where he gets his strength from, and that's where he grows. That's where he starts his emunah actually, and bitachon actually take him to a level where he has complete and utter trust in everything that happens in his life. So that's not so easy today. I'm going to be honest with you, people get shaken for many different reasons. People find themselves, in difficult situations where they're being tested. They're being tested. But a person has to work on it. So I will tell you that there is a pasuk that says, how does a person get emunah? Ha'emanti ki adaber. Ha'emanti, there's a pasuk, ha'emanti, I believe, I trust, ki adaber, and I speak in it. So Chazal teach us that. Ha'emanti, how? How do I develop that emunah? How do I develop that bitachon? Ki adaber, because I'm constantly talking about it. When you constantly say to yourself, I trust, I believe, even when things are not bad, when you're driving in the car, you just say, Hashem, I trust you 100%. The more it's almost like a pep talk to yourself. The more you talk about it to yourself, the more you get actually rewarded. Not that just that you're fooling yourself into believing it. You get rewarded. Hashem says, because you're constantly bringing it up, I will reward you by strengthening your emunah and bitachon. So a person can develop that emunah and bitachon if he's constantly doing things, acting on situations, even before it gets difficult. To work on, Hashem, I trust in you, I have faith in you, I trust in you, I know you're doing everything for my best. So when you do get challenged, you're more prepared. So that's one thing I wanted to mention to you. So emunah is a state of understanding, and a bitachon is a state of trust. I will tell you that Rav Shlomo Wolbe once came to Reb Chatzkel Levenstein, and he asked him that he was much younger. He was in his younger years of Shlomo Wolbe, and he went to Reb Chatzkel, and he says, I want you to please give me something that I could take back to my students, wherever it was. I think in Gateshead he was in the time. But it wasn't in Eretz Yisrael at the time. He wanted to take something back with him. And Reb Chatzkel told him, tell them there's a God in this world. Tell them there's a God I've developed. There's a God in this world. So Shlomo Wolbe was a little shaken and taken by that. Like, why would I tell that to my students? Who doesn't believe that there's a God in this world? Who needs to know that there's a God I've developed? So Shlomo Wolbe, when he went back, wherever he was going, to his yeshiva, to his talmidim, he said that it took him 2.5 weeks, that he worked on what Reb Chatzkel meant, and finally after 2.5 weeks, it hit him what Reb Chatzkel was referring to. He doesn't say, I didn't see what it was, but working on emunah is a lifelong endeavor. Working on bitachon is a lifelong endeavor. So that's regarding emunah and bitachon. The question is, how does a person solidify? How does a person solidify his emunah and bitachon? So I want to tell you an unbelievable story. I want to tell you an unbelievable story with Rebbe Elyashiv. Story to Rebbe Elyashiv, a fascinating, tremendous story. There was once a woman whose husband was dying of cancer, Rahman al-Litzlan, very, very sick. He was almost at the end. And a very famous Askin, his name was Dr. Fisher, who was always involved in the klal work in Eretz Yisrael, whether it was, arranging flights for people. He was an Askin. He was like the Moshe Sherers of the world, the Mike Tresses of the world, the Rabbi Glucks of the world. They get involved in klal Yisrael's day-to-day, situations. And this Dr. Fisher was living in Bnei Brak, and he was involved in a lot of different situations, getting people into hospitals. There's a famous person named Shuki Berman, who also involved in the klal work of getting people hospitals, the right doctors. These are very big, important klal people that really spend most of their day helping klal Yisrael. So this Dr. Fisher went with this woman to Rebbe Elyashiv to find out like this. There was a medicine, a trial medication that came out in America, and it was very, very not proven. It was just something new. There was a very, very small chance that it would help. So this woman came with Dr. Fisher to ask Rebbe Elyashiv if she's allowed to go on Shabbos to America, because every day counts. If she should go this coming Shabbos to America, they arranged for the flight, for a doctor. I forgot exactly all the details, but she was going to fly on Shabbos to this doctor. They brought all the paperwork and all the information to Rebbe Elyashiv, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, but Rebbe Elyashiv said she should not go on Shabbos to America. She should go Motzei Shabbos. For whatever reason, he said she should go Motzei Shabbos. Maybe he saw something, maybe he noticed something, but he said she should not go with Dr. Fisher on Shabbos. Okay. So she stands up, and in front of Rebbe Elyashiv, she says, I trust in Emunas Chachamim. I trust in Rabbi Yashiv. I trust in the Gedolim that if they tell me something, I'll accept it. And even if Chas v'Shalom, her husband, doesn't make it in general, if he doesn't make it, she trusts that everything Hashem does is for the best. And even though she has 6 children that will be Yisomim, but she knows that everything Hashem is for the best, and she accepts it wholeheartedly. She accepts it, not about just going on Shabbos, but in general, her situation, and she's about to leave. Rabbi Yoshev turns to her and says, come back in for a second, come back in. And Rabbi Yoshev said, please tell me what you just said. Repeat it over again. So she, pretty much in the same wording, she says, I trust in the Emunas Chachamim, I trust in Rabbi Yoshev's Psak, I accept Rabbi Yoshev's Psak, I also understand that whatever Hashem wants will be, and if my children are supposed to be left Yisomim, she accepts it b'leiv shalom. When Rabbi Yoshev heard this, he became very shaken by it, and he turns to Dr. Fisher, and he says to him, arrange for a flight today, if you can, that she should fly today to America, and on Shabbos to Friday afternoon, get on that plane as soon as possible, and Kachava, they arranged the flight for Friday night. Dr. Fisher went with her, because he was the only one that would be able to talk to the doctors and what they needed, and they went on Shabbos. A few years later, actually, the story goes that he actually lived for another 12 years. 12 years he lived, even though he was mamash agoisis almost, lived for another 12 years. He actually was also in the kollel by Rabbi Yoshev. And Rabbi Yoshev is the one that sent him, and he spent another 11 years after he went through all the trials. 11 years he was still in kollel by Rabbi Yoshev. He lived another 12 years. So they asked Reb Chaim Kanievsky once if he remembers this story, if he knows the story, and he says, yes, I do know the story, and I do remember the story. So they asked I think it was Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein asked Reb Chaim Kanievsky what happened that originally Rabbi Yoshev said not to go, and then Rabbi Yoshev, whatever the woman said, Rabbi Yoshev said they should go. So Reb Chaim said that originally Rabbi Yoshev felt, for whatever reason, what he saw, he felt that there's that there's not enough schusim to change the situation. There's not enough schusim, whatever it is, to change the situation, and she should wait till Motzei Shabbos, even though Pekuach Nefesh. I don't want to get involved what it was that he said. But Reb Chaim said once the woman got up and said what she said about her emunah in Chachamim, and the emunah that she has in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rabbi Yoshev felt at that moment that the schus, that she had so much emunah and betachon, would warrant that her husband will get better and that he should go to America even on Shabbos. So from the power of the emunah and betachon that this woman had, Rabbi Yoshev felt that the fact that she said that believe shalom in the emunah, that she's ready to accept whatever Hashem wants, and she has emunah chachamim, whatever they paskin, that's the way it should be. All of a sudden it changed her schusim, and now her husband has enough schusim that they should even travel immediately, including on Shabbos, to go for this refuah. So I thought that was a very powerful story about what emunah and betachon can do for someone when he needs it. You never know. I want to tell you a little story that happened to me, a little personal story actually. 10 years ago, my daughter was getting married. She got engaged in November, and I think Hurricane Sandy was in late October, if I'm not mistaken. And I live near the beach in Far Rockaway. And I got really hit hard by Hurricane Sandy. You should know, I had an entire library of Sfarim. I didn't use it as much as I should. That's the MS, maybe that's why I lost it. But I had an entire library of close to, $75,000 worth of Sfarim. And I hate to say it, they were pretty new also. Like I said, maybe that's why I lost it. But I had a beautiful library. I was collecting Sfarim. I would look in a few, but I had so many different Sfarim. I had so many different, the best Sfarim, the most expensive Sfarim I actually had. And I lost all of that. And then I lost a tremendous amount of my wife's business. She was a sheitel macher. She is a sheitel macher. So a lot of the business was lost. So I was hit with a lot. Baruch Hashem, I was hit with a lot. And then my daughter is getting married. And I didn't really have that much money put away. And any money that I needed to recoup for from the Hurricane Sandy. And I do remember we all had insurance and adjusters come to each one of our homes on the block. We all had the same homes. We all had the same, pretty much, layouts of our houses, exactly the same. So whatever the insurance feels that you should be protected for the basements, flooding places, whatever it is, where it's, more closer to the ocean, you have less chance of getting more money. So I do remember this, that everybody sent adjusters, we were getting adjusters involved. I had 2 German adjusters come. They barely spoke English, I'm serious. They were German, they were speaking Yiddish, and I knew they were Dutch, and they were speaking in German, and they take their pen out and they're writing stuff up, and I'm thinking, I'm probably not getting much out of this. I don't know why I thought so, I just had that feeling. Anyway, everyone got a certain amount. I'm not questioning what they got. When I didn't get, I guess he saw the business. I was worried if it's legal regarding getting flooding insurance. I'm not sure what it was. 7 weeks before my daughter's wedding, again, she was engaged for 2 months. 2 weeks after the engagement period, I do remember, I get a check for over $60,000. And I don't know how much everybody else get because of all the damage I had. And then other people came to, help me with my svarim, 20, 30,000 for my svarim. It's not the issue. But Hashem sent me the money I needed for my daughter's wedding. Literally, everyone had to wait weeks and weeks and weeks till they got their money. And I, Baruch Hashem, was able to get it within a week or 2. And I remember them telling me, don't worry, we know exactly what your damage is. And they were writing, and they took actually pictures, and they made diagrams of this was here, that was here. And Baruch Hashem, I was zeicha. And I remembered saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because somebody told me that when it comes time for weddings, Hashem sends miracles. If you have emunah and bitachon b'Hashem, Hashem sends before weddings. Everybody has Eretz Yisrael gets married pretty much. People have 11, 12, 13, 14 children. How do they marry them off? Buy apartments. How do they even pay for weddings to help their chassid and kalas? And these people are, before the 11, 12 children, when they had 1 child, it was difficult. 2 children, it's difficult. 11, 12, to marry them all off. And Hashem makes miracles. Because if you have emunah and bitachon, and you ride the wave, not the wave from Hurricane Sandy, but you ride the wave, Hashem sends miracles. So emunah and bitachon plays a tremendous role, obviously, in our daily living. And the more you trust in the process, the more you trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the more Hashem will shine His light upon you and will send you those miracles. That's Parshas Behar I want to discuss. Now I want to discuss Parshas Bechukotai. And the pasuk begins in Parshas Bechukotai. In Bechukotai Telechu, it starts off, if you will go in my ways, Hashem says, Ves mitzvosai tishmeiru, and my mitzvos you will keep, Vasisim osem, you will do them. If you will do them, then what does Hashem promise? He's going to cause rain. He's going to cause great season, fruitfulness. There will be a lot of produce, and you'll make parnasa. Parnasa will be very bountiful. So Rashi though says, when it says the words mitzvosai tishmoru, keep my mitzvos, what is Bechukotai, my laws, telechu, you should go in? What does that mean? What is he referring to? So Rashi says, in Bechukotai telechu, if you will go in my laws, what does it refer to? So Rashi says, Yochuzu kiyam ha-mitzvos. You would think it means kiyam ha-mitzvos, but keshu omer ves mitzvosai tishmoru, once it says already mitzvosai tishmoru, harei kiyam ha-mitzvos omer, it already says mitzvos. Hamani mekayim bechukotai, if you go in my chukim, in my laws. So Rashi says, shetiyu amelim b'Torah, that a person has to be amal in Torah, not just learn Torah, but amal. Amal is almost like a yoke. Almost means it becomes burdensome in a positive way. Amal, you're strenuous, you put effort, you work hard, and everybody it's a different amal, what amelus b'Torah means. So my brother Rabbi Avrohom Walkin Zatzal, he says over a tremendous thing on this. It says, "Im bechukotai telechu," if you will follow in my chukim, if you go in my chukim, Rashi says, "Amelus b'Torah." Then the psukim say right afterwards, "V'im bechukotai loy telechu." If you don't go in my chukim, there will be klala, there will be curse. Now, if bechukotai means amelus b'Torah, that means v'im bechukotai loy telechu refers to not being amal b'Torah, right? Im bechukotai lechu amelus b'Torah, and im bechukotai lo telechu, if you don't be amal in Torah, you have curses. That is fascinating. That means that if a person is not amal on his level, that Hashem knows that he's putting his effort in fully, whatever that means, or very intense amelus, then there'll be curses. So God should say, 1 second, I'm doing mitzvos, I'm doing wonderful things. That's all special. I agree. But from the psukim, that's what it's mashma. In bechukotai telechu, if you are amal b'Torah, like Rashi says. Ve'im bechukotai lo teilechu, this klalos. So you see how much a person has to be careful that he's putting in an effort, a good effort, into his learning of Torah. Now, the Maral says, what's the lashon teilechu? Going. If it's amelis b'Torah, you're not going. Where are you going? If it's teilechu, it's the Bechukotai yilmedu, or Bechukotai atem chayim. You're living with amelis b'Torah. What's teilechu going? What's the lashon of going? So actually, the Or HaChaim actually has 5-6 pages, long pages, just on that inyan of amelis b'Torah and teilechu. And he says many, many things. He also uses the lashon, the lashon of rabbim of Bechukotai, which it means more than one amelis b'Torah. What does it refer to? So he actually says the lashon teilechu is telling us that when it comes to amelis b'Torah, when it comes to spirituality, teilechu is teaching you that you go every time you're amal b'Torah, every time you're yogea in Torah, every time you work hard in Torah, you're going from Michael el Chayil. You're going from one spiritual level to the next spiritual level, to the next, and you constantly are moving in spiritual levels. So when you're amal b'Torah, you're not just accomplishing one thing. You keep growing. You keep growing and growing and growing. So he says that is the reason why it says the words teilechu. And he also says, it says in Gemara Brachos, he brings down the moral. In Daf Samach Dalet, it says, Amar Reb Chia Ba'ashi, Amar Rav, Talmidei Chachamim, Ein Lehem Menucha Lo Ba'olam Hazeh. They don't have any rest in this world for Lo Ba'olam Haba, and they don't have rest in the next world. They don't have rest in this world, and they don't have rest in the next world. So it seems like a negative thing, right? They have no menucha, right? That means it's almost not fair to them. They don't have rest in this world, and they don't have rest in the next world. So the Maral wants to explain, what does it mean, teilechu, with this? That they don't have rest because they're constantly moving upward. In other words, the fact that they're not staying status quo is a maila, not a chisara. That they keep moving forward, up, up, and up. They don't have rest in this world, and therefore they keep moving forward, and therefore they don't even have rest in the next world, because the Torah that they learn even in this world, some people actually, even in the next world, keep going because of their learning that they learned. They go from one shear to a higher shear because they put in the effort here. So their learning up in Shemayim is also on a higher level, and therefore they keep moving. Now I want to mention a Sifra Ditzniyusa. A Sefer Ditzniyusa was a Sefer written by Reb Chaim Volozhin, and in it he writes in Perek Gimel, he writes about the Vilna Gaon, something very fascinating about the Vilna Gaon. He says that his Rebbe, the Vilna Gaon, he says, that Reb Chaim Volozhin says, used to be Zoicha, that many nights of his life he would have malachim, he would have higher non-human beings that would approach him during the night to give him sodos and secrets of the Torah, to tell him yesodos, nister, things of nister would come to him constantly at night, and the Vilna Gaon would constantly tell them to go away. He doesn't want anything from them. He doesn't want to learn anything from them. He doesn't want anything. Because the Vilna Gaon would tell them that he wants only Torah that he worked on, that he was amal in, and not that he got from an outside source. So the Vilna Gaon himself actually had the malachim, had celestial beings that would come to him and want to teach him secrets of the Torah that normal humans can't get. Only people on the Vilna Gaon's level, and he never accepted it because he wanted to be amal b'Torah. He wanted to get his Torah through Yogea. Very important what it means to be Yogea b'Torah. Because when a person's Yogea b'Torah, it builds his emunah and bitachon. I want to tell you, there's nothing greater to build someone's emunah and bitachon, and that's why that week's, the first Parsha Behar talks about emunah and bitachon, and Bechukotai talks about amelis b'Torah. Because when a person is amal b'Torah, he actually builds his emunah and bitachon, because it strengthens in him his closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It shows his neshama reaches very high levels of ruchnius because of his learning, and therefore when you connect more to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the source of your life because of your learning. So when a person is Yogea, when a person is amul b'Torah, when it's hard for him, when it's not easy. I remember when I was 16, 17, and I was in a certain yeshiva, and I wasn't always learning to my best of my ability, but I remember going to a certain yeshiva, we're not going to mention it, and I remember the hours and hours I would break my head just to learn on my own, just to, even with a Sansino Gemara that they had, they didn't have art school in those days. I remember how hard I would work. I would spend 2-3 hours on 4 or 5 lines. And I do remember the closeness and the emunah and betachon and my soul, my neshama was mamish on a different plateau, not from the knowing it, but from the hard work. It's not about, it says when we finish Masechta, we say in the Hadrid, Anu amelim v'heim amelim, Anu amelim u'makablim schar. We work and we get rewarded. V'heim and the non-Jews of the world, the non-Torah world, you could be amal in something, right? You could work, but if you don't finish the project, if your boss tells you to come up with a certain project that's needed, and you don't, and he's sitting with all his investors, and you come in there and you say in front of all the investors, they're waiting for the file, for the whole thing on board, to point to it, and you say, sorry, I tried my best, but I don't have it. Maybe one time you'll get away with it. I don't even think so, but by the second time, you're not keeping your job probably. But yet, by Kadosh Baruch Hu, it's not even finishing, it's the amelus. This is a world of amelus. It's not about finishing. It's about the work you put in. The golus, it's about battling. It's about striving. It's about working hard. In the next world, you get your payros. You get it in this world too, to a certain degree, obviously. You get closest to Hashem, like I said, emunah and betachon. You get a trust in Hashem. You get a closeness to Hashem. But the payros are really for the next world. The Talmud Torah keneged kulam, right? Right? And it refers to really Talmud Torah, because in the next world you'll see all the work you put into your learning, all the work you put into your learning. So a person should never think that he tried and he didn't succeed, because the trying is success. The trying is success. You know, they say over a Shimon Shkop says an amazing thing, a lot of amazing things, but it says, Ein davar ha'omed lifnei haratzon. Nothing stands in the way of the will of a person, right? So I always had a question on that. Nothing stands in the way of the will of a person. If somebody's 100 years old and he can't walk, chas v'shalom, if he's paralyzed, chas v'shalom, he's hooked up to things, right? And he wants to win the marathon, right? At 100 years old, and he's never ran the marathon, and he can't even move his legs, or he's not winning the marathon. You can't say nothing stands in the way of the will of a person. If chas v'shalom, somebody actually doesn't even have, let's say, legs, chas v'shalom, right? And he wants to run the marathon, right? Run it regularly without getting, the metal, what are they called? Prosthetics, there you go, sorry. He's not winning the marathon. Why would he can't run even? So what does it mean? Ein davar omer lifnei haratzon. He can have the will. So if Shimon Shkop says an unbelievable thing, he says, not that you'll finish the job, not that you'll reach your destination, but ein davar omer lifnei haratzon says, nothing stands in the way of the will of a person. A person could always have the will. Even in the Holocaust, people were being murdered, gassed, right? But many Jews fought, but they fought with their minds. They kept sane, many of them. They remained religious, not judging anyone, but they remained after the Holocaust, some of them religious. They stayed strong. They survived because mentally they knew that Ein davar omer lifnei haratzon, their will to survive, many of them, their will to stay close to Hashem, their will to not give up, helped them, guided them. So therefore a person could will his way, not that he'll get what he wants, but he can always have the ratzon, he can always have the want and desire. So we're going to end with that. I want to give you all a bracha. I will actually end with one story, actually. I will end with one story. I don't know if, I didn't tell you the story of the Klosenberger Rebbe, right? With the Meron. Incredible story. One of the greatest stories. I heard it from Rav Pesach Krohn, maybe 20-something years ago, to be honest. 25 years ago I heard it. Yeah, over 25 years ago I heard from Rav Pesach Krohn. The Klosenberger Rebbe was known for not just his greatness in Torah, but his avoda that he put in to his Hasidim that he lost in the war, before the war, during the war, and what he built after the war. The Klosenberger Rebbe lost 11 children and a wife in the Holocaust. 11! And he was the one during the Holocaust, after the Holocaust, giving chizuk to all Jewry. He was known right after the Holocaust when they were liberated. He made Shabbosim. He gave people Emunah and Betachon. He was unbelievable in what he accomplished. The Kloisenberger Rebbe. And for 20 years, I think, around, he didn't go to visit Eretz Yisrael even once, even though he lived the last years of his life there. And he built a famous community in Kiryat Sanz, and the hospitals and the chesed that he accomplished. Mamish, the Kloisenberg Rebbe, was huge, and he lives on through his chassidim. So he didn't go to Eretz Yisrael for 20 years. He didn't go for 20 years. Finally, he comes to Eretz Yisrael. I think it was right after they got the wall. I think in 67, after the Six-Day War, I think it was, right? When they overtook the wall. And he came to the Mokim HaMikdash by the Kaisel for the first time in 20 years. And when he got to the words by Shachar, Ezehu Mim Kaimin Shal Zvachim, where is the place of the Zvachim, of the Karbanas? It's brought down that he cried for 45 minutes to an hour. He couldn't continue because he was looking at the Mokim HaMikdash and he says, where is the place of Zvachim? Where is the place of our Karbanas? Just when he first got there, that's just something Pesach Kron said over. But he decided to make the trip, obviously, to Meron, and he went to the cave of Shimba Yochai, and he went to Rabbi Akiva, he went to the Rambam, he went all around. His last stop was by the cave of Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai. That's where his last stop was, and he went to the cave there, and it must have been it was very late in the evening, okay? It was past Shkia by an hour or two for sure. And the Kloisenberger Rebbe was known to daven Mincha much later after the Zman of Shkia. He was known to daven Musaf on Hallel, on Rosh Chodesh, very late into almost way past Shkia. That was his minhag. He would daven an hour or two after Shkia. So he comes to Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai's caver, and he with his chassidim, he davens Mincha. And then after he finishes Mincha, he gets into the two minivans that took them. He went with around 15 chassidim. And they took 7 or 8 in each minivan. And as soon as he gets into the minivan, they offer him to drink something, to eat something. He became visibly very, very disturbed. And he said, I can't eat and I can't drink anything. I can't eat anything and I can't drink anything. Okay. Then he proceeds, he takes it at the Helm, and he starts crying. And no one knew what happened here. Like this change from the simcha and joy that he went around all day on this trip. All of a sudden, the whole trip back, he was shaking, he wasn't himself. He gets back around 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning to Yerushalayim. And again, no eating, no drinking, nothing. He stayed up the whole night, as Gaboyim said. He stayed up the whole night. He was either saying, who knows, crying and meditating and beseeching Hashem for something. No one understood what happened. The next morning, he davened Shachar early, and at around 9 o'clock, he says, we must go back to Tzfas. We must go back on this 4 or 5 hour journey back to Tzfas. I need 10 chassidim. He took 10, 12 people, whatever he took, and they started their trek back to where he just came from. At 2 in the morning, he just came home, and he's on his way back. He gets there by around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And what does he do? He says, we must go directly back to the cave of Yehuda Bar Ilai. And he goes there, and he says, let's daven Mincha now. And he davens Mincha there for over an hour. And he's crying. And then he goes to the caver, and for 15, 20 minutes, he's crying by the caver. He gets back into to the van at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We can go back to Yerushalayim now. And now please give me something to eat or drink, because I haven't eaten or drank anything since the day before, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And he was relaxed and he was calm. And they asked him what happened. He said, yesterday when we davened Mincha at 9 o'clock at night, way past the Zman of Shkia, I davened by the cave of Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai, and I realized when I got into the van that the Mishnah in Brachos, the Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai, Perik Daled, Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai holds that you can't daven Mincha past Plag. He holds a certain Zman. How could he have been insensitive to daven at the caver of a Tana at a time that he holds you can't daven? How is he so insensitive to daven at a Tana's caver at his man that doesn't go with according to his pshat, according to his halacha? So I realized the whole night, I was crying, how could I have had this insensitivity? So I decided I'm going to stay up the whole night. I'm going to fast, and we're going to make our first opportunity to go back to Tzfas, 4 or 5 hour trip, to daven by Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai's cave at his man that he holds is permitted. And only then will I have the proper forgiveness, maybe, for disrespecting on the minutest of level, without even any intention, to this holy Tana. Therefore, I felt I had to go back and daven at his kever. Sensitivity is a very powerful trait. It doesn't just come naturally. But when a person works on being sensitive, and he works on caring, and he has emunah b'tachon, and he's amul b'torah, and he does the things that he has to do to get closer to Hashem, it will develop. Sensitivity is something you do develop. I remember growing up with a friend of mine who actually was a very rough guy, very tough, rough, an LA kind of guy, very always tough, very cool guy, very tough. And today he's one of the most sensitive people I ever met. He's a tzaddik, he's so sensitive, he's so caring, he's so different than when I grew up with him, all because of his avodah and his amelus and all the work he put in. So I wish you all a good week, have a good Shabbos, and thank you for coming.